you an idea as to some of the players that I think are looking did well or struggled. So anyway, let's have a quick run through the game first. In that first half, especially initially, England really did not cope well under the high ball. And both Daly and May made a few errors under that. And let's be honest, Daly has not had a lot of experience at fullback recently. He often plays in the centres for Wasps and also on the wing for England as well. So, I guess not fully surprising that could be a case. Not something that's just sprung to mind is that, remember, he got that red card against Argentina when he first moved out onto the wing as well. So yeah, it's going to take a time for him to get used to that position, but that's kind of what you might expect. May though did have a very good game chasing and definitely forced to try and force players into doing things there actually with speed. Now we saw England early on try and put a kick through, go through for May. We didn't actually see that again really much in the game, which is a bit of a surprise. I thought we were going to see that quite a bit when Slade put that first one through in the first couple of minutes. England then got called offside by South Africa, who went for goal. And when the game finished at 12-11, it's not surprised that's what happened. We only had one try in the whole game. Very different from, say, the Japan All Blacks game. And in this one, the tackling was up in the 80% for both of the teams. It was a tough old match in that kind of sense. Daly and May both got through a few errors, and then we got that yellow card for Itoje for basically repeat infringements because England were under so much pressure from South Africa. This was only 15 minutes in that this happened. And if we look, even by the end of the game, it was 11 penalties conceded by England to only 5 by South Africa. So it looked like it was England were really struggling under that. Hi, Simon Hughes is on the live chat. He says it looked like it was the most competitive match of the weekend. It's the most competitive one I've seen. I've not seen all the games yet. I'll be watching Wales versus Scotland after this one. But as I say, Itoje got that yellow card. England had given up they gave up 5 penalties to 0 early on, which is not surprised. But England got saved by a line out overthrow by Marks, and that was one of those things that was going to come back and haunt South Africa throughout this game. There were at least 3 line-outs that were overthrown. And looking at the stats, they had 18 line-outs and 1 14. So they lost 4. 3 of those were overthrows. At least 2 of them were on the 5-metre line. So they really were key line-outs that South Africa lost as well, because their maul really was working in that first half. One of the things I noticed was that Dylan Hartley was squinting at the first ruck, and then also had contact lens issues later on as well in that first half. Just a little sort of side note, really. And in that entire first half, England didn't get into the South African 22 once with ball, which is just amazing, and yet came out of it 6-8. South Africa gave up a rare error in their own half under the high ball. Basically, they knocked it on. They were much better under the high ball in that first half, allowing Farrell to knock over 3 points. So England actually came out of that yellow card period 3-0 up. They actually conceded less points than they made. We had that the second of those 5-metre lineouts that South Africa were doing. I thought South Africa really mixed up their running between their forwards and then using their centres in Delendi and Creel pretty well. Pollard also got himself involved as well, taking it to the line occasionally, and I thought that was really good. But the English defence did manage to cut it off, and the back 3 for South Africa in that first half really didn't get to see much ball and didn't get much action. We'll go through and have a look at the personal stats afterwards. But South Africa were, at one point, and then he made that breakthrough. They got some go-forward ball and managed to spin it wide for Nkosi to score in the corner. Dante and Warren Whiteley using the hands to free him up to get over in the corner. So the rare occurrence that it did get out to their wide men, that's how they scored their only try. I was a bit surprised to learn that Pollard's kicking percentage with South Africa is about 75%. I thought he was a better kicker than that. But on the day, actually, he did miss a penalty. He did miss this conversion. He missed a penalty in the second half. And when you're talking about a game that finishes up being won and lost by 1 point, that really was the difference here. He had a kicking percentage of 50%, whereas Farrell had a kicking percentage Farrell and Daly had a kicking percentage of 80% between them. So, that's Pollard's kicking. Now, I thought it was much better. I thought it was better kicking than that. Cost the Boks in this one, but you got to say what cost the Boks more was more the line out throwing really. England on 36 minutes again. Probably their second time they had the ball in the South African half. South Africa got offside and they knocked over another 3. One of the problems with England's tackling was all very high, which meant that they were bouncing off Delendy quite a lot. They weren't taking him round the legs. Whereas when you saw someone like Teo trying to break the line, you saw at least one of the South Africans would take him around the legs, chop him down, and they wouldn't get the same go forward ball in that first half, especially. Carl Sinclair was one of the rare people who was tackling lower down. I thought Carl Sinclair had a pretty good game in this one, both defensively and also on attack as well. Sure, the scrum was under a bit of pressure in that first half. I'm not sure that was his fault. It might have been Harry Williams on the other side of the scrum, and perhaps Moon should have started and Harry Williams finished the same way they do for Exeter. Because when they switched over at half time, Moon had a better. The England scrum did better in that second half with Moon there. It's never always just about the props. It's also about what weight's coming through from the second row and all sorts of other things. And I thought from the overhead shot that the England second row, their backsides were more spread apart and perhaps a bit looser, looking at how the 8 was holding them, than the South African locks, who looked to be much more compact and closer together. I'm no scrummaging expert, but I say that's just what it looked like for me. So 6-8 at half-time, England only trailing by 2 points, and yet they didn't enter the South African 22 once during that half. So 67% possession, 78% territory for the Springboks, but only leading by 2 was criminal. One of the stats I find surprising here is that England made 13 clean breaks to South Africa's 4, even though South Africa definitely had more defenders beaten with 23 versus 20. So, a bit surprising that, and that'll be a lot of that in that second half. England came out in the second half and they did a lot better. The territory in possession was 52% to South Africa, so clearly nowhere near the sort of levels they had in that first half. But they still had more, slightly more possession and territory in that second half. We had Daly getting a long distance penalty to put England into the lead after 50 minutes, and his long boot clearly is a big bonus to England. We saw Farrell have a kick later on that came up short, which so maybe Daly should have taken that one as well. But hey, hindsight is a wonderful thing, and it wasn't short by much. It wasn't until the 52nd minute that England actually got into the South African 22, which is absolutely crazy. That it took them that long to get in there, and they still managed to win this game. South Africa have just got themselves to blame, A, with those kicks, and B, with those lineouts. Those are two big things here that clearly meant that South Africa lost this game rather than England winning it. Sure, they kept themselves in it. You can only beat the side in the day and all that kind of stuff. But this was a missed opportunity by South Africa, in my opinion. England did have some good breaks, good attack, especially in the second half. I say 13 clean breaks, but they weren't clinical enough. They didn't get the passes away at the right time. Daly was free and running and probably should have passed out to May for in one opportunity. But he was not the only one by any stretch of imagination. There were other players as well who made breaks, and then there weren't enough support players, or the last pass just didn't go when it should have done. And England, definitely need to become much more clinical when they do get their opportunities. So they didn't score a try in this one, let's be honest. Ben Youngs had a good game. A lot of his kicking was pretty good. And as well, you probably say, Paul, you're talking more about the England players than the South African ones. Well, yes, I do have an English jersey on under here. It's just a bit too cold for me to show it. And if we just have a quick, I'm just going to gone blank with names. Just going to bring up the South African lineup on my phone. But Van Zyl, I thought, had a pretty good game against South Africa. Against England. Initially, he looked like he was used to playing at a lower level. Was trying a lot more things that he'd get away with at a lower level, but won't get away with at Test match level. So I think I think he had a pretty decent game, obviously with Faf de Klerk missing. Parkty says, so the England A team to be back for the All Blacks. No, this was the England A team. It's not going to get much better than this. So I thought he had a decent game for South Africa. I say initially tried to do perhaps a bit too much too early. I think he learnt his lesson and settled into the game well. Obviously, we've talked about already that Pollard, Delande, Creel had good games with ball in hand. And the back three really was starved of ball for them. Up front, obviously from a scrummaging point of view, the front row and obviously the locks had a good game against England, especially in that first half. Second half struggled. Marks, as has been said there, did have a poor game with his lineouts. We didn't see him getting the turnovers that you'd normally see him have. As well. And the Lucies, with the Khaleesi, Whiteley and Vermeulen weren't able to dominate the breakdown in the same way that they did it in, or something that South Africa managed to do in South Africa. You've got to say that Curry, Wilson, Shields had a good game. Itoje also was quick off the line as well. Wilson got around the park quite a lot. Tom Curry seemed to was up there, would be making the first tackle, but bouncing off. He'd be I say the England people, a lot of the England players were trying to tackle too high and maybe perhaps strip the ball. We saw Brad Shields do that as well. In there, so I think Sinclair had a very good game, as did Williams. So in that second half, Farrell had a shot that went short. England were going well, but then trying to play out of their own half. I mean, in the first half they lost the key. They were kind of losing that kicking duel. So they were trying to, and they got some success playing out their own half in the second half. They tried doing that once, gave a penalty, which gave up 3. But England were playing at a better pace in this second half. It was all a little bit quicker. Got themselves a scrum penalty, which put them in the lead. Gave up a scrum penalty, and Pollard just shaved the post and missed. And that was the end of it, really. A couple of things later on. Should South Africa have tried a drop goal? Yes. That didn't get themselves into position, didn't have a go. Was Farrell's tackle at the very end a shoulder charge? I think we saw both arms coming round. Did he? It was a hard hit. No two ways about it. Did he end up grasping the player? No. But I think the arms were there to try to, and I'm happy with the referee's call. You might say, yes, Paul, you're English. Of course you're happy with the referee's call. I do not think it was the blatant shoulder charge that perhaps Stuart Barnes was suggesting on the TV commentary. And some of the comments I've seen on Twitter as well, along those sort of lines. So that's the game. Let's look at some of the stats of some of the players. I mean, also some of the stats I've already called out, with those clean breaks, those line outs, problem penalties. The tackling, as I say, was up in the 80s, which is good. Looking at some of the player stats, from an attacking point of view, we have it was a lot of kicking, so I mean, no one got particularly large numbers when we're talking about running with ball in hand. I think it's topped by Pollard with 65. Delende was up there with 63 with 15 carries. Pollard had 12 carries. Those guys got through a lot of work. Creel only 4 carries, but he did. But it seemed like a lot more during the game. We saw his name mentioned quite a bit. On the England side, yeah, Daly and May both with high numbers of carries of 11 and 10, but they were both quite a lot running back the ball. There, Tio got through a bit of work, but 8 carries for 4 meters shows, yeah, he didn't have much of an impact. We didn't really see him from a from an attacking point of view. Wilson, 11 carries again, also got through some work, and Detroit for South Africa amongst the forwards. On the defence side of things, Delende got through a shift of work there as well, 11 tackles, just the 1 missed. Carl Sinclair, I called out earlier, 10 tackles in there, just 1 missed. Where, I mean, Itoje, Cruz, Shields, Wilson, all in double figures as well as Ben Moon as well, who came on at half time. So a big shift for him in the second half. For South Africa, Whiteley and Detroit both in there with double figures on the old tackles. Saw some big clear-outs by Dwayne Vermeulen. Perhaps didn't have the impact in this game as you'd expect. Mercer also got through 10 tackles as well. I'd say England gave up most of the penalties. Itoje picked up 3. Sinclair a couple, Cruz a couple as well. Itoje does play on the line. England early on at the line out tested how much they would be allowed to touch players in the air, and were very quickly told you're not allowed to touch them at all. There's definitely an element of England sort of figuring out where Gardner's interpretations are early on, I think. So in summary, the South Africa's mistakes let them down. They should have won. This was a missed opportunity for them. They should have won this. England, to their credit, did stay in the game, kicked their goals, and came away with a win. And it was a much needed win for them from a morale point of view. They've had a torrid sort of 12 months or so, or at least, maybe not 12 months, but at least this year. With the Six Nations, and then also the Tour of South Africa, which they lost 2-1. So yeah, much needed win for them, which will help hopefully put them in good stead. But let's be honest, the All Blacks next weekend will not make the same mistakes South Africa have made this week. England are going to have to be a lot tighter on defence and not going to have to bounce off of tackles in the same way. And they're going to have to look after that ball. South Africa, they go on to play France next, I think it is. Well, as we always say, what France is going to turn up. But there is an element of that. I'd expect South Africa will be looking at fixing their line out, fixing some of the kicking, and should therefore have enough. Therefore, we're looking for a win over France in that game. So I'm off to go watch Wales versus Scotland and then do a post-match reaction to that one. So do enjoy it, and thank you for watching. Oh yeah, don't forget to subscribe up there. And also there's 2 movies up there 2 videos up there that are not movies that if you've stuck around this long, I'm sure you'll absolutely enjoy. Perhaps there's big chances, big changes to the All Blacks next week. Obviously, we're going to see the same side that rolled out against Australia in Bledisloe Cup 3, not the team that rolled out against Japan. Basically, the team that rolled out against Australia are already in England preparing for that game. So yes, that's who we're going to see.